Have you ever just stood there, looked out at your backyard, and thought, there's got to be more I can do with this space? Well, you're not alone. And today, we're going to talk about exactly how to unlock that potential by building a second, smaller home right there on your property. Yep, we are talking all about accessory dwelling units, or as you'll hear them called, ADUs. Let's get right into it.
So what's all the buzz about? Why are homeowners everywhere suddenly so excited about this? Well, a lot of the time, it comes down to this number right here. We're talking about $1,500 a month, or even more. That's what a good ADU can bring in as long-term rental income in a lot of cities. Think about it. That's money that can help pay down your mortgage, or just build up your savings. It's basically a powerful financial engine hiding in plain sight as a cute backyard cottage.
All right, so before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What is an ADU exactly? Super simple. It's a small, independent home that's on the same piece of land as your main house. You've probably heard other names for it, right? Like a granny flat, an in-law suite, maybe a backyard cottage. The key thing is it's a complete home. It has its own kitchen, its own bathroom, its own entrance. Totally self-sufficient.
Okay, to make this super easy to follow, we've laid everything out like a roadmap. We'll start with the big one, what an ADU actually costs. Then we'll get into what you can realistically build based on the rules. After that, we'll tackle a huge decision. Should you go prefab or a custom build? And we'll wrap it all up with how you can actually pay for it. Sound good? Let's go.
First stop on our roadmap, and it's the question that's on everyone's mind, right? What's the bottom line? How much is this thing really going to cost? And I'm not just talking about the lumber and nails. We're talking about the total, all-in budget from the first sketch to the final coat of paint.
Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. For a typical ADU project in 2025, you're likely looking at a range between $180,000 and $400,000. Whoa, right? That's a huge range, I know. But it makes sense when you think about it. The final price tag really depends on what you build, how big it is, and of course, where you live. Building in California is going to cost a whole lot more than building in, say, Ohio.
And this chart here really breaks it down for us. You can see how the type of ADU you choose totally drives the cost. A brand new, detached little house in your backyard, yeah, that's usually at the top end because you're starting from absolute scratch. On the other hand, converting your garage is often the cheapest way to get into the game because, hey, the walls and roof are already there. And then you've got prefab units, which are a really interesting option, kind of in the middle, offering a bit more certainty on the final price.
So where does all that money actually go? This is super important. You can see that about 2/3 of it is the actual building. The fun stuff, the framing, the finishes. But look at this. A whopping 20% is for site work and utilities. That's the stuff people forget about. It's digging trenches to connect the sewer, water, and power. That's a huge chunk of change. And please, whatever you do, don't forget that little slice for contingency. That's your uh-oh fund for when things inevitably don't go exactly to plan.
Okay, so we've talked money. Now let's talk about the rules. What can you actually build on your property? For a long time, the rules were, well, they were a nightmare. They were the #1 reason projects died. But that's changing, and fast. We're going to use California as our case study here, mainly because their new state laws have kind of become the gold standard that a lot of other places are starting to copy.
Which leads us to what was, for decades, one of the biggest project killers out there, especially if you live in a city, the parking question. For so long, cities would say, sure, you can build a little house, but you also have to add another parking spot, and for most people, that was just impossible. It stopped so many projects cold.
But now, the answer is often a big, beautiful no. In California, for example, if you're within a half-mile walk of public transit, poof, the parking requirement is gone. Same thing if you're just converting a space that's already there, like your garage. This one change, this single rule, has been an absolute game changer. It's unlocked the possibility of building an ADU for literally millions of people.
All right, what about size? How big can you go? This is another place where state law has really stepped in. In California, the state basically sets a minimum standard. It says that no matter what your local city wants, they have to let you build an ADU that's at least 800 square feet and sometimes even up to 1,000. Same for height. You're guaranteed at least 16 feet. This is huge because it stops cities from trying to kill projects by saying, okay, you can build one, but it can only be 200 square feet. And there are a few other rules that have made a massive difference. You only need 4 feet of space from your property line now. That's your setback. That's a huge deal for tight city lots. Also, they can't force the owner to live on the property anymore, which gives you a ton of flexibility. And maybe best of all, the approval process is way faster. It's supposed to take about 60 days. Basically, if you follow the rules, they have to say yes. But, and this is super important, these are the state rules. You absolutely have to double-check your own local city and county regulations because they can still have their own little quirks.
Okay, so you've figured out the cost, you've checked the rules. Now for the fun part. How are you actually going to build this thing? You've really got two main forks in the road here. You can go with a prefab unit, or you can go with a totally custom, traditional build.
And really, the decision comes down to one core trade-off. It's speed and cost predictability versus design flexibility. With prefab, you get speed. The thing is mostly built in a factory, so you know pretty much what it's going to cost and when it'll be done. With a custom or stick-built home, you get total freedom. You can design whatever you want, and it's much better if you have a tricky, sloped, or weirdly shaped lot.
Let's dig into that a little more. You can see here, speed is the biggest win for prefab. We're talking 5 to 8 months versus potentially over a year for custom. There's also way less disruption in your backyard, since a lot of the work happens off-site. On the other hand, if you have a really specific design in mind, or your backyard is on a steep hill, custom is just way more adaptable. It's all about what's most important to you. Getting it done fast and on budget, or getting it done exactly the way you envision it.
All right, we're at the last major stop on our journey, and it's a big one. How are you going to pay for all this? Let's be real, most of us don't have a couple $100,000 sitting in a shoebox, so understanding how to finance your ADU is absolutely critical.
So you've basically got three main tools in your financial toolbox for this. First, there's the HELOC, a home equity line of credit. Think of it like a credit card that uses your house as collateral. It's super flexible. Then you have a cash-out refinance. That's when you get a whole new mortgage for a bigger amount, and you get the difference in cash. And finally, there's the classic construction loan, which is designed for exactly this kind of project. It pays out your builder in chunks as the work gets done.
Now, for the actual construction phase, most people end up choosing between a HELOC and a construction loan. So let's compare them. The big pro for a HELOC is that it's fast to set up, and you only pay interest on the money you're actually using at that moment. The big con, the interest rate can change, which is a little scary. A construction loan, on the other hand, is much more structured. The bank sends an inspector out to make sure the work is done right before they pay the next bill. That's great for reducing risk, but it does mean a lot more paperwork.
So let's zoom out and look at the whole shebang, from start to finish. This timeline is a fantastic reality check. Look at how much has to happen before construction even starts. You've got weeks of design and then months, potentially, of waiting for permits. The actual build is just one piece of the puzzle. All in, from that first phone call to getting the keys, you should probably plan on the whole thing taking anywhere from 5 months to, well, over a year.
And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our roadmap. We've gone through the cost, the rules, how to build it, and how to pay for it. So really, there's only one question left, and it's the one that only you can answer. Whether you're thinking about it for extra income, for aging parents, or just for your own future flexibility. What could you do with a second home in your backyard?